What the hell is going on with trannies? Most of us don't believe that there are 96 genders or whatever we're up to now. Most of us do not believe that gender is a spectrum. Even if we're talking about gender as let's say the socially mediated, socially constructed, socially inculcated set of norms and expectations and roles surrounding biological sex, so that is, not biological sex itself, then, biological sex is not a spectrum. It's a binary. It's either or. It's XX or XY. And there can be, chromosome disorders or developmental disorders that, interrupt how the chromosomes normally express themselves, but that doesn't change the binary. That doesn't necessitate ditching the binary. That doesn't necessitate adopting a schema that includes every possible, variation and abnormality and defect. And those people, with the chromosome disorders or whatever, they're not demanding that for the most part. They're not insisting on that. They understand that, they kind of fall outside of the schema. And they just it seems like they just sort of try to make the most of that. They don't try to overturn that. And so if biological sex is not a spectrum, then it doesn't make sense to conceive of gender as a spectrum because, even if we're defining gender to be, the social stuff around biological sex, then, if the underlying thing itself, biological sex, is a binary, then it makes more sense to have, the roles and the expectations and the norms be binary, because you're either one sex or the other. All right, and it's certainly possible for individuals to be more like one thing or less like another, in varying degrees, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to discard the binary. So it doesn't add any value to do that. A man who thinks he's a woman, doesn't add any value compared to, a man who thinks he's a man or a woman who thinks she's a woman. Those are people with valuable roles to play. And, somebody who's all mixed up doesn't have a valuable role to play. Because if you're all mixed up, you can't play the role that you need to play in order to be valuable to other people. So, there's a famous quote by some Stoic philosopher. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was, Marcus Aurelius or, maybe Seneca or Epictetus. If I were a man, I would play the part of a man. And if I were a swan, I would play the part of a swan, right? So there's an element of maturity to playing the part that you're assigned. We all have a part to play in this. And there's a part that you can play best by virtue of what you are. And if everybody is playing the part that they can play best, then that's the strongest society. That's the most functional and most productive society. And if you're just insisting on playing another part that you can't play best, then, that's kind of immature and selfish and self-indulgent. And, there's all sorts of unpleasant ways you could characterize that. It's not pro-social behavior, that's anti-social behavior. But what the hell is going on here? What's the root of all this? I already said I don't think it's the chromosomal disorders or whatever. There's a friend of mine who has a theory, which is that a lot of these people are just gay men who want to have sex with straight men, and so they try to look like women, and they try to act like women as much as they can. And they don't necessarily think that they are women, but, they just want to have sex with gay men, and they'll say, they want to have sex with straight men. They'll do and say what they think they need to do in order to pull that off. And you'll never have to go far to find a tranny, arguing that he shouldn't have to tell you he's a tranny before he has sex with you. Or, that if you're a straight man and you won't have sex with a trans woman, so-called, then that makes you a bigot and a transphobe, and you should be ashamed of yourself, right? And this lends credence to that theory. This is consistent with that theory. So, to me, that checks out. That's plausible. There could be a lot of these characters running around. These gay men, manipulative, predatory gay men. Sociopathic or psychopathic, pathologically dishonest gay men who are just saying that they're women and acting like women and trying to look like women in order to have sex with straight men. So that theory checks out to me. I don't think it's the whole story, but that could be a big part of it. Another theory I've heard about people like Bruce Jenner is, some of these older, like celebrity, high-profile men who have enjoyed great acclaim and renown in their youth, once they start to slip into obscurity, they're looking for some way to get back onto the public stage, to get back into the limelight. And this is a new option that has opened up to them. And for a great many, it must be a tempting option because, there's nothing sexier than rebellion or revolt against outdated whatever. And at least in our modern Western society, that's kind of an ethos and a mythos that's been elevated to, epic proportions. And here's this new way that you can do that. That's trendy, and, everybody will give you a pat on the back and ooh and ah, right? And you're back in the limelight. You're back in the public eye. You're back in center stage. So for someone who's used to that, that might be a very appealing option. And then you have more generally, obscure people who do it because it's hip and it's trendy, right? It is a hip, trendy thing to do. And you get, furthermore, instant victim cred, which is like a boost in status. Because all this social justice stuff is just a Nietzschean revolt of the underclasses, right? Undesirable people, unable people, unwilling people, just objectively, the bottom barrel type people. They're revolting against standards and judgment and merit and, any kind of objective or even intersubjective, standards or judgment. And so, here you have this prepackaged victim cred, this prepackaged victim role that you can slip into. And not only is it hip and trendy and it's the latest new thing and there's a little bit of a rebellious air to it, but, it also gives you power. Because in New York, now it's a hate crime not to call these people by their preferred pronouns. In Ontario, it's a hate crime not to call these people by their preferred pronouns. So you can slip into this victim role and instantly start bullying and intimidating people. You have something to hang over their heads. You have some victim muscles to flex. And all you have to do is act like a freak. Easy. Anybody can do it. So that's got to be appealing, tremendously appealing to some people. And we also live in a culture where, men and masculinity are denigrated and devalued and denounced and demonized, right? How many headlines and articles have you seen about toxic masculinity? And, anything traditionally masculine is kind of vilified. And we are, the explanation for everybody else's failures. And we are the emblem of historical evil. And, we're the privileged scions of illegitimate conquest and plunder and exploitation throughout history, right? So there's just this tremendous, anti-male and especially if you're a white male, a straight white male, just this tremendous animus and this tremendous enmity that exists against you. And, you can escape all that just by acting like a freak. You can escape all that. You can get away from it. And not only get away from it, but you can get that vaunted, victim status. You can go up. You can ride at the front of the victim bus. Instantly raise your social status according to this inverted pyramid of merit that the social justice warriors have constructed around, demerit, basically. It's an upside down meritocracy. So, if your alternatives are to be a masculine male, straight white male, and just get shat on all the time, or you can be like a tranny freak, and you probably still get shat on by dinosaurs like me, but who cares? We're marginal. We are social pariahs and outcasts at this point. You're going to get applauded by the mainstream society or the mainstream media, right? You're going to be lionized. You're going to be, everybody's going to be on your side, or it seems like that way. And you're instantly going to go up in social status and victim cred and victim status, and you're going to get this power. And that must be tremendously appealing to people who don't want to live up to the demands of traditional masculinity, or who are unable to live up to those demands. And, it's an easy out. It's an easy out. And, this male privilege stuff is pretty much bullshit anyway, because the male privilege is the privilege to take risks that could pay off. And so you wind up at the top, but they could also not pay off. And you could wind up in the gutter, in prison, or in an insane asylum, right? And even biology takes risks. Men are more variable, more diverse than women. And part of that is because even Mother Nature is fucking rolling the dice with your genes. And that's just what it is to be male, is to take risks. Because to be male is to be expendable. And so, you can take risks, and the species can take risks with you. And so from biology to, social norms and everything else, you are to take a higher amount of risk. And that could pay off, and you wind up at the top, or it could not pay off, and you wind up at the very bottom. And so that's male privilege. If you look at the top and you see all the males, that's not the whole picture. You have to look at the bottom too. You have to look at the gutter. You have to look at the battlefield. You have to look at the prison. You have to look at the insane asylum. And those places are disproportionately filled with males as well. So, that's male privilege. The privilege to take that risk and to roll those dice. So the male privilege thing is bullshit. But, if you don't want to do that, if you just want to hang out in the middle with the women and play it safe, then that must be tremendously appealing to a lot of people. And then furthermore, if you're just going to get shat on as a man for trying to play the part of a man, again, that's got to be tremendously appealing to a lot of people who just want an easy out. So, this may not be the whole story, this may not be the whole picture, but I think a lot of these things are probably, a big part of what's going on. And, it's really not healthy. There's a lot that's going on that's not healthy with that. And I think we need to turn it around. And, maybe some of the ways to do that, or all the ways to do that, are probably beyond the scope of this video or any other. But, that's something to think about. And, the first step is just to start taking these people off their pedestal.